So 2 hours ago, I just received this sword, and I thought I might do a comparison between this one and another antique sword that I already own and show you the differences, but there are quite some similarities as well. So stay with me and see you right after the intro. Hi, I'm Peter and welcome to the History and Sabre Suites, the channel where I talk about HEMA, history and swords. So today's video is about these two guys. These are very different but also very similar swords. I'd like to go over the differences and similarities and show you how they handle from a fencer's perspective. Okay, so first off, the sword I just received earlier today is this one, and it's an 1892 pattern blade. So the British thrusting blade that came in 1892, and it's made by Wilkinson, and it's probably for a rifle officer's sword because of the steel Gothic hilt that was only kept for the rifles and some other regiments. And as you can see, it has the bugle with the crown on top, and otherwise it's a standard infantry regulation sword. So it has the thrusting blade, and it has the 1895 backstrap and grip construction, but retains the earlier Gothic hilt. So I received this one, and this is the first 1892 style sword that I've handled myself because they are not so common in Austria, although British swords in general are fairly common here, I'd say. So this is the first I've handled myself really, and I've had time to play around with it for a few hours now, and I quite like it. So the one I'd like to compare it with is this one. This is the 1845 infantry officer's sword. It has, of course, the Gothic hilt made of brass, and also the fullered blade type that came in 1845. But this one, interestingly, is completely straight, so it compares quite favorably to the latest sword that I just got earlier today. And for that reason, I like to compare the two because they have a similar hilt style, they have a straight blade, both of them, and they are quite close in weight as well. So now they both have an 82 centimeter blade, which is just over 32 inches regulation length. They both are within, I think, 20 or 30 grams of each other, and they both have a point of balance of 13 centimeters. But of course, their blade cross-section and therefore their use for the fencer is quite different. Now, they handle pretty similarly, I can tell you that. But of course, there are also some differences. Now, let me go over those real quick. As you can see, the grip construction is a bit different. The earlier sword has the brass backstrap that has no checkered thumb placer, as you can see, while the 1895 backstrap is fully checkered and has a squared off thumb area. Now, what's also quite interesting is if you look at both swords again side by side, the earlier 1845 sword is a lot smaller. The grip section, that is, just look at the grip length, and also the guard size is quite different. Now, personally, I prefer the grip of the earlier sword because, as you can see, my hand fits this one quite nicely, even when I put my thumb on the backstrap. It's a very, very nice size for my hand because I'm a smaller guy. This sword fits me quite nicely. And now in comparison, look at the latest sword. It has a massive grip. If you compare the two, if I put my thumb up here, there's quite some room there that's left. And of course, I think this one is longer because you're supposed to grip it in a thumbs up grip all the time. But this one is really also thicker in circumference than the earlier one, and I generally prefer the earlier grip because it's smaller. I'm sure this is down to sample variation as well. You can never rule that out. but I prefer the older one. Now let me talk a little bit about the edge geometry. The 1892 thrusting blade has a dumbbell section here. Others on YouTube have talked about this at length, so I'm going to keep it short. But what this means basically is that it has a very thick cross section, both on the front edge and the back edge. And it stays very wide up until the last third of the blade, where it kind of tapers to a cutting edge. Not really, but I guess you could call it that if you sharpen it. But interestingly, the back edge stays very, very thick and wide up until maybe 6, 7, 8 centimeters from the tip. So up until here, it stays very, very wide, and therefore it has quite some rigidity for thrusting, which is good, of course, if you want to thrust. And it's also very good for parrying. But you can't really sharpen it below the upper third of the blade and maybe, as I said, 7 or 8 centimeters from the tip. So this and this portion here really is everything you can sharpen on this blade, because otherwise it's just too wide. Now in contrast, the earlier blade, of course, has an edge bevel going right from the forts, from the ricasso, up to the tip. And it also has a false edge that runs approximately 1/3 down from the tip. And this is basically, the back edge of this sword is basically as long as the front edge on the 1892 blade. So while I think they both handle similarly and they both handle well, I kind of agree with what Captain Hutton said in the discussion about thrust versus cut. And I also kind of agree with Matt Easton and others on YouTube and in various groups that I don't really see the point of the 1892 blade if you can have a compromise blade that's as well done as the 1845 one. So basically that's just my short opinion, my short review, if you will, of the 1845 versus 1892 blades. And I personally don't really see why you would give up all the cutting ability, or let's say 98% of your cutting ability with the later blades, when you could just keep your cutting ability with the earlier blade type, because the earlier one is also very good at thrusting. I mean, it has a spear point, it's rigid enough, and I don't see why you would give that up completely. So if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more content on HEMA, history and swords, and see you in the next one. Bye!